Wow. Well, before we get started, I have a little bit of a confession to make. I've been listening to all these amazing speakers up here, and I'm a lot of things. I'm proud of a little company we built called SharpSpring. Maybe some of you have heard of it, maybe not. I don't know. We're just up the road in Gainesville. I consider myself a product guy, and I consider myself a marketing guy, but probably one of the last things I am is a public speaker. So I want you to know that right off the bat. And in fact, I was not sure whether or not I was going to do this presentation. This audience is by far the largest audience that I've ever been up on a stage in front of. And so I thought back and forth about it, and I ultimately called Ted. And Ted, he talked me into doing it, and I'm glad I'm here. And he gave me a piece of advice, and I'm going to follow that today. But to be honest with you, I feel a little bit bad about it, and I just wanted to share it with you. There's no easy way to say this, but I'm going to picture you all naked through most of this presentation. Okay, if that's all right, I figure you need to know, so I'm gonna let you know right off the bat. I'm looking out, you're all naked. I'm not making eye contact with any of you. I'll say on the upside, some of you look pretty fantastic, but again, I'm not making any eye contact, so everything's okay, right? Okay, well let's go ahead and get started. This screen could be a little bit larger. I'm okay. Could be a little larger. Feel like it should have that American flag up here, and I should have the general's outfit on. Is that like Patton from that movie? Okay, before your time. Got it. Great. So let's get started. In 1990 or thereabouts, my dad bought a car. And I bet your dad bought a car too. I don't know. When my dad bought a car, he had an experience. He looked on television, probably saw some ads, but ultimately he went to the newspaper and figured out who the dealers were. And very, very quickly, he was in the dealership. Okay, so he started having all those conversations. Most of his experience was in the dealership talking to a salesperson. Fast forward to last year, and my wife bought a car, and the experience was wildly different. She spent all of her time online, surprise, right? She went to car review sites trying to narrow down her search. She went to different auto manufacturers. She was looking at all kinds of stuff from Hondas to Mercedes to whatever, but she went through all of those various sites. And if you compare and contrast those experiences, a real shift has happened. And it's probably not much of a surprise to any of you, but the buyer's journey has really shifted from a seller-controlled experience where everything happens in a showroom or in face-to-face communications, really controlled by the seller, to a buyer-powered self-guided tour. My wife, she was all over the place. By the time she ended up at a dealership, she had 95% of her questions answered. So, you look good, sir. I accidentally made eye contact. I gotta reinforce it, right? So, all right. So, quick review. What is the buyer's journey? For the purposes of this conversation, the buyer's journey is pretty simple. It's your journey it's the buyer's journey from initial awareness of you, your product, your service, on through a consideration phase where they're eliminating they're eliminating, hopefully not you, all of the other competitors that are out there competing with you for your product and service and winning the buyer over, to ultimately that buyer's decision and whether or not to purchase, and if to purchase, then to purchase from who. The critical thing to understand about the buyer journey is that communication needs to happen along the entire journey and that communication changes at each stage of the buyer journey. So if we think about my dad and his purchase, it's really indicative of this diagram, where 85% of the buyer's journey was controlled by the seller and involved contact with a human being, right? If we contrast that now, buyers now, today, the vast majority of their experience is taking place on their own. It's happening online, it's happening on your site, it's happening on the reviewer sites, it's happening on influencer sites and content creators all over the world. So let's take one step deeper here and talk about what's actually happening now. If you'll bear with me for a minute and we'll see how engaged you guys really are. If you feel like it, close your eyes and think about that time when you purchased a car. Maybe you can picture that salesperson you were dealing with. You know, I don't know, maybe it was the typical salesperson giving you too much pressure. Maybe that greasy sales guy, I don't know. Maybe they were naked, I'm not sure. I wasn't there with you. I don't know, but I want you to wipe all that stuff aside and think about what was happening in your conversations with that person. It was really rich communication. It was a sales process, and so there was a rapid understanding that was taking place. You were able to ask the questions that you wanted to ask and get the answers that you wanted in real time, immediately. But that's not all that was happening. That salesperson was sizing you up as well. They were trying to decide whether or not you could buy that Ferrari F30 that I know you were all looking for. I'm just, you know, looking at the crowd, assuming that was the car. And they're trying to decide whether or not you cared about reliability or performance or warranty, or whether you were a payment buyer or somebody who was going to buy cash and wasn't worried about financing. So in those communications, the seller was getting all kinds of information back as well. Well, during this transition that we've talked about, all that has changed. Now the car manufacturers, they actually have their stuff together. I'm being very polite today. They've got their processes together, and but most businesses are not as buttoned up as these car manufacturers. Instead, what we look at today, even today, when we've progressed along in this new process, most websites are still static. They're nothing more than digital billboards, if we think about it. Most people are still blasting emails out to very large audiences and treating everybody the same. As you think about your own purchase decision when making a car, or my wife's or my dad's, chances are all of those things were unique experiences, unique decisions, unique points of interest for each person in that buyer journey. But today's websites and digital marketing are only just beginning to treat people like individuals. But what if we could take digital marketing, take the content that you guys are creating, and what if we could bring the very best, leave behind the greasy sales guy, leave behind the high pressure tactics, but take that rich communication that was happening when you were standing in front of somebody and being able to converse with them in real time? What if we could do that in the era of digital marketing? Well, how would we do it? Let's start with what we wouldn't do. We wouldn't have static websites. We wouldn't have these digital billboards. We wouldn't blast our buyers, our leads, our prospects. You ever notice there's war terms that we talk about? Launching a campaign against people and blasting them with email. You know, we certainly wouldn't treat all leads equally, right? Some leads are better than others in the purchase process. Some are more of a fit for your organization and some aren't. And we definitely, above all, would not have the same conversation with everybody because, as we've discussed, everybody's purchase motivations are different. So contrasting that, what we would do, we would have adaptive websites. We'd have smart, responsive websites that engage users, that engage visitors. We'd personalize everything. In fact, we'd hyper-personalize it. We'd qualify leads. We'd be gathering information at the same time as we're presenting information. We'd be creating a two-way communication. And in respect of the buyer's journey and where they are in that process, we would nurture them appropriately along the entire path until they made a decision one way or another. So what I'm talking about today is, in the long view, is really that we're in a different era, and we're right in the middle of it, and some industries have really embraced this thing and are way out in front, and some are just back in the Stone Ages. We started way back with mass marketing, and then somebody had the bright idea to segment our audiences. We moved into relationship marketing, and today we're in an era of hyper-personalized communication, and that's only going to get better with the introduction of artificial intelligence and predictive modeling. So this is where we are today, and it's what I'm here to talk to you about. My company and companies like mine, some of you know, HubSpot, Marketo, Acton, Pardot, my company SharpSpring, we're in the business of marketing automation, and I like to think of marketing automation as enabling these truly hyper-personalized communications based on the content that a lot of people in this room are responsible for creating and putting those messages in front of the right people at exactly the right time. So it's not enough to create engaging content, and it's not enough to get it to the right person. It's got to be all three of those things: engaging content to the right person at exactly the right time in their buyer journey. And marketing automation helps to enable that with a whole host of tools that I'll talk to you about briefly as well. So a lot of smarter people than me have been studying this, and a few stats to kind of get you excited, rip through these very quickly. Personalized content, not surprisingly, can double the conversion rates on your website. Surprise. Email communication that is personalized has both a large increase in open rates, but also a large increase in click-through rates. And those two things work together and result in conversion rates across the board of something like 4 times when you're using personalized, relevant content that's tied directly to the user and their interests. Companies that adopt personas, and I'm going to talk about personas in just a minute, to categorize their leads and their prospects, when they first begin to use personas and set goals, they had overachieved them 93% of the time. So the cumulative effect of all this is that you widen the funnel, your sales funnel, from top to bottom, across the whole funnel. And ultimately that happens because marketing automation and hyper-personalized content help you drive leads into the top of the funnel because you're talking to people up there when they're becoming aware of you, and you're talking to them in a way that makes sense to them. Once those leads are in your funnel, personalization helps you convert those leads further down in the funnel and helps you to turn those leads into opportunities. And once you have those opportunities, all of these same tools, not surprisingly, help you turn those opportunities into sales and revenue. So at a high level, that's what marketing automation and excellent content working together are able to do for a business. So we'll show you a little bit about that and show you some of the technical pieces here. But first, let's just review briefly a traditional funnel. So here's just it's my favorite animation here. I don't know, somebody spent some time doing this. Here's a traditional marketing funnel. And as you can see, anybody who's responsible for driving leads in a business knows that this is true. Most of the leads go flying right by your funnel. And the ones that end up in your funnel as they work through a conversion process, as they work through their buyer journey, they exit the funnel constantly, okay? Especially in a traditional funnel, when you're not personalizing and when you're not communicating and you're not nurturing leads the way they deserve to be taken care of. In fact, at every stage of the traditional marketing funnel, as leads move through the funnel, more than 50% of them disappear, and you're left with just a few percentage points at the end. So if we think about a funnel enhanced by personalized content and marketing automation, we'll be able to capture more of those leads. So just quickly, a definition of marketing automation for those of you who may not be familiar. It's really a suite of tools. It's a set of tools that can be used across the entire funnel, and it really enables this hyper-personalization through technology, and it seeks to mimic that conversation that my dad had with that salesperson, or maybe any of you had with the salesperson once you were there. That real-time responsive communication where you get the answers to the questions that you're asking and not a bunch of generic content. And at the same time, marketing automation like that salesperson can help a seller qualify leads and figure out which leads to work with and where to spend your resources. It creates a truly two-way communication. So you're moving from a digital billboard to something that is a website that's facilitating two-way communication in real time. So here we have the traditional funnel. I'll run through this pretty quickly. At the top of the funnel, kind of driving leads into your funnel, there's a suite of tools targeted towards that. And just looking at a few of these things, next generation responsive, not just responsive, but dynamic email that adapts. I'm going to show you an example of that in just a second. AdWords integration, where you can see the keywords that people are searching for coming into the website, and your website can actually adapt in real time to that information. Blogging and RSS tools, lots of things to talk about. Dynamic landing pages and forms, I'll talk to you about that. Marketing automation tools can even identify anonymous web users at the company level and help you target more leads. And of course, analytics to make all this stuff, to optimize all this stuff. So just a quick example of a dynamic form. These forms are responsive. They can actually change based on information that you already know about a lead. So if you already know where they happen to be living, you don't have to ask that question again. You can ask a different set of questions. Anonymous web visitor information, I think I talked briefly about that. This is one of the things I wanted to show you that's really the sum of what I'm talking about. This is the exact same email. It's the exact same email sent to two different people. This gentleman who looks like he's a member of ZZ Top here, Steve is apparently interested in cold weather type vacations. The seller knows this based on past experience, based on user behavior on the site, and we can market to Steve in an entirely different way with exactly the same email as we are to Mary over here, who seems to be interested in perhaps historical travel, okay? So the email itself can adapt to what we know about the user as it's being sent to the user. When that person clicks on that email, they can now come back to a website that also adapts, giving a completely unified, natural experience in just exactly the same way as a salesperson might respond to finding out that you're interested in a specific feature on a car. What are they going to do? They're going to talk about that feature. So your email and your landing pages can do exactly the same thing. And so this landing page has been set up to look like that email and provide that unified experience. Why do we care? Because that leads to conversions. When you're giving people information that they want at that moment, they end up buying more often than they do when you're talking to them generically. So that's kind of at the top of the funnel. In the middle of the funnel, you really use a lot of the same tools, and there's a few more, and I'll concentrate on those. All marketing automation tools have this kind of information. In our tool, it's called the life of the lead. we can collect every meaningful interaction about a lead on a single timeline. Examples of those things: the referring website that brought them to the site, every page visit, every form fill out, every video that they've watched on your site, every piece of content, white paper, et cetera, all of that, every form that they've ever filled out, if they've attended an event like this, if they've been on a webinar with you, that can all be collected here, and that can all be used in a myriad of ways to personalize your communication with them in an automated fashion. But just because it's automated doesn't mean it's not personalized. In fact, it's enhanced by automation. You couldn't possibly speak to these people in a personalized way when you're dealing with thousands of people visiting your site. All of that interaction and tracking that I spoke to you about can be wrapped up in what we call a lead score. And a lead score is basically a numerical representation of how interested that person is in your product or service and how much of a fit they are with your product or service. So they can be very interested but not a fit. For example, they can't afford it, that Ferrari F30. But lead scoring can be used to determine when somebody's ready for sales in a B2B environment, or to determine that they're towards the bottom of the funnel and we need to change the way we're communicating with them. And when they have a lower lead score, it means they need to be nurtured. They need to be nurtured through, they're up at the top of the funnel. They're just becoming aware of your product or service, and you might communicate with them in a different way. So two examples of how lead scoring can work, and those examples are just two of many. Dynamic list building. We can now create dynamic lists based on user behavior, okay? So not just segmentation based on demographics. We can create a dynamic list of anybody who's seen this product page 3 times in the last week and who has a lead score above 150 and happens to be from Denver. And these lists are dynamic because as new members meet that criteria tomorrow, they're automatically added to the list. And as other members break that criteria, they're removed from the list. So you suddenly have this list in front of you of micro-targeted segments that you can use to market to in any number of ways. Dynamic list building. Personas, I touched on this earlier. Marketers today, more and more, if you're not using personas, you need to consider it. Personas, you're talking to thousands of users, and yes, we want to have absolutely individual conversations with them, but the truth is we need to bucket them from a practical perspective. We can bucket them based on their behaviors and their interests, and we can write content targeted towards a very, very specific persona. That target, guess what, is more relevant. The person who's a safety buyer in a car, in a car purchase decision versus a performance buyer. We can write personas and then create content that's more relevant to them. So all these tools are also available to help you in your closing process as well. Obviously, as you listen to what I'm talking about, you can see where it's relevant across the entire process. But all of these tools can also tie into shopping carts and CRM systems for both B2B businesses and B2C businesses. And analytics are included in marketing automation as well. The combination of those two things allows you to see end-to-end ROI. So you can constantly eliminate the tactics and channels that aren't working and double down on the things that are working. And guess what that does? It produces more leads at the top of the funnel, and there's a constant process of iteration and optimization. Some of these tools, contact insights, social integration included, sales pipeline, campaign insights, just track everything in your funnel so you understand, again, what's working and what isn't, in not just driving leads or driving opportunities, but all the way through, end-to-end ROI. I spent $10,000 this month on channel X, and out of the backside of that, I got $15,000 in revenue. 3 months later, I can see all of that in real time with the analytics that are included in a marketing automation tool. So if we look at the whole funnel, you can see where applying these tools and the content that all of you guys create and use them in unison, how that can lead to a wider funnel across the spectrum of your channel. So summing that up, these tools are designed to mimic that experience that you had with a salesperson the last time you were there. Two-way communication, pulling back all that behavioral information about a lead and using that information, not in a nefarious way, by the way, but to give people the information that they want. We're kind of solving the spam problem if you use these tools properly, because when you give relevant information to people, they want it. I'm probably preaching to the choir on that in this group. So that's my presentation. I hope you learned a little something from it. I'll try to stop looking at you naked. I'm in the back over here. If you walk up, I can't guarantee I'll turn that off, but you've been warned. Look, I would challenge you that if you're not doing any of these things, that you consider taking a look at marketing automation, taking a look at using personas, really taking a look at ways to score your leads and segment your leads in a way that's will help you in your business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job. All right.